Welcome to the 85th International Webinar hosted by Believers Church Medical College. Today we have an exciting webinar on current pandemic trends and an exciting speaker with us. This session will be moderated by Dr. John C. George, the Medical Superintendent of our institution and Head of Oncology Department. Sir was the Chief Officer managing the COVID control activities in our hospital during the pandemic, and under his efficient management, we have won international and national recognitions for the COVID control activities. To give an overview of the topic and to introduce the speaker, I welcome Dr. John C. George. Over to sir.
Thank you, Dr. Abel. We had a wonderful speaker today, an exceptional speaker today, and we are expecting a good, excellent talk today from Dr. Rajiv. Let me introduce the speaker, Dr. Rajiv Jayadevan. Dr. Rajiv Jayadevan has done his MBBS and MD in General Medicine from Christian Medical College, Vellore. In 1995, he has also done an MRCP from Erasmus University in Netherlands, and also has board certification in medicine and gastroenterology fellowship from New York Medical College. He is a gastroenterologist, a grassroots level social worker, public educator, researcher, mentor, writer, author, and speaker. In his spare time, he also volunteers to teach in schools on assorted health topics, directly interacting with students of all ages. He writes on complex health matters and regularly appears on TV and radio. He has written detailed analytical articles on over 70 assorted health-related topics. He's also an author of the book, Think Like a Doctor, which was released 2 years ago. He has also championed several social causes, including prevention of road accidents, noise pollution, teen alcoholism, tobacco use. And he was also the president of the IMA Cochin Association during 2019-2020.
You are here for the you would be home.
His academic track record is also exceptional, and he is currently hails from Ernakulam.
You're not going.
Can the audience mute, please? Actually, we are having disturbances here. Please mute. Thank you. Currently, Dr. Rajiv is also the Vice Chairman of State IMA Research Cell. He is also the past convener Communication Skills Training State IMA 2014 to 2021. And he is also the convener of the Scientific Committee and past president of IMA Cochin. He is also the co-chairman National Task Force IMA for Coronavirus Pandemic. It is a great delight to hear from you, sir. Over to you, Dr. Rajiv.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and for the introduction. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. We can hear you. Please, can you?
All right. Yeah, so the topic for the day will be an overview of the pandemic, where we stand. And I will start by sharing my screen. Can you see the screen?
We can see the screen, sir.
Okay. In 2001, September 11, most people in the world will remember this date. When this event was happening, I was doing endoscopy. Can I ask the person to mute? There's a lot of noise.
Can the other participants please mute? Ulla sir, can you mute, please?
Thank you. So when this event was happening, I remember I was doing my gastroenterology training in New York, and this event happened just 5 miles away from where I was working. So we know the rest of the story. The reason I'm mentioning it here is to give you a little bit of a backstory to this. We know that many people unfortunately died when the buildings collapsed. But what few people realize is that some people escaped in spite of the planes hitting the towers. And do you know what separated them from those who died? These are people who could think beyond the ordinary. These are people who could assess the situation and come up with a customized conclusion. I'll explain what I mean by that. As the planes hit, remember, this is an enormous building, and you hardly even feel anything when you're sitting in an office downstairs. So they knew that there was a problem. And in the beginning, there was confusion. So then the announcement came through the overhead speaker saying, look, there's a problem upstairs. You can go back to your desk, go back to work. Everything is being sorted out. So many people returned to their seats and continued to work. It was a busy working morning. Some people knew that there was something more to this. They figured, if a plane has hit our building, it makes no sense in my staying inside the building. It was a very basic decision to make. So these people, they took the stairs down and they ignored all the comfort warnings. I call these comfort warnings. Everything's under control. You can go back to your seats.
892.1 51324.
Can everybody mute, please?
Anuba, when you please mute. Anuba.
Can the administrator take care of it? Because this is disruptive. I cannot speak when people are making noise. I cannot. Can the administrator please mute all the speakers, all the audience, please? Because I'm giving you an intellectual presentation and it's really disrupting if people make noise. Okay, so this story was interrupted twice. To cut a long story short, to survive a major crisis, you need good decisions, and decisions might have to be made on sparse data. Data might not be immediately available to you, so that is where you have to use a lot of common sense. Can everybody mute, please?
പമ്പ് ചെയ്യുക ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അപ്പം അതൊരു ബോൾവാർ സിസ്റ്റമാണ്. ഒരു 50 ലിറ്റർ വെള്ളം നമ്മൾ എടുക്കുവാണെങ്കിൽ ഓട്ടോമാറ്റിക് 50 ലിറ്റർ വെള്ളം അതിനകത്ത് നിറഞ്ഞു.
Are we muted now? Are we muted?
Sorry for the interruption, sir. Please carry on. We have muted everybody now.
Thank you. So the moral of the story is, to survive an emergency, you need to anticipate. So the pandemic is an emergency that is not happening as fast as the World Trade Center bombing or the tragedy, but it is happening in slow motion. So many people took what is called comfort thoughts. And whenever a crisis happens in anyone's life, the instinct is always to go towards the comfort, to the person who gives you the comfort speech. I'm here to tell you that comfort speech in an emergency is the last thing we want. Comfort speech may be good in friendship or when someone is having a little bit of a life crisis. But in an emergency, let's say somebody's having a choking in the throat, a piece of meat is stuck in the throat. You don't want to go and tell them, hey, you know what, everything will be fine. Just, stay there until we get the ambulance. That person will die. Likewise, I see this a lot about the pandemic. And the latest comfort decision is the pandemic is over. People are believing that the pandemic is over. All precautions can be taken out. Even the data can be stopped. So all over the world, people are stopping, reporting, and this is a clear sign of uncomfortable times ahead. So that is why I said anticipation is crucial. And to stay 2 steps ahead, we need good data and also good networking. So as the chairman or vice chairman of the research cell and also the past president of IMA Cochin, myself and a bunch of committed doctors from Cochin area, both in government and public sector and private sector, and with the associations of the Kerala government medical colleges, National Health Mission, Indian Medical Association, all of us got together, formed a very large consortium, and we run what is called the Tuesday COVID meetings. This is perhaps the longest running, continuously running meetings in history for COVID. We've not broken these meetings ever since the pandemic started. So we meet up like we did yesterday, 2 days ago, and then we discuss various aspects of the pandemic, and we've given out so many, let's say, press releases, public announcements. We educate the public. We talk on the radio. We come on television. So based on these observations, we've come out with a lot of warnings for the government and for policymakers as well in the country and even abroad through other social media. So that is the power of networking. When you don't have a lot of data being offered to you on a platter, you have to go and find it. So that is what, that process consumes a lot of my time. And what I'm going to give you today is some of the data that I have collected and I have analyzed. So which is why I said this is going to be a very intellectual presentation. I need to concentrate here. All right. So here are some of the practical tips we give out. We gave out for out of the COVID meetings. And we were the first to publish on healthcare worker deaths in India. At a time when we published, people said we were making up the numbers. So many doctors could not have died. In May of 2020, it was, there were as many as 100 doctor deaths and several nurses' deaths, and people would not believe it. So we were the first to report it. And we, even before this happened, in April of 2020, that is when the world was still waking up to the pandemic, we sent out customized instructions to nurses, specifically nurses, and to healthcare workers and to doctors in particular, giving them clear, precise instructions about how to save their own lives first and then of other people. Like in the aircraft, when the oxygen level drops, you have to put on your own mask first and then save the other people. So the pandemic was one such situation where doctors and nurses were dying in large numbers all across the world. And some of you will still remember the 183-page article that I put out on healthcare worker deaths worldwide in April 2020. So that is why I said anticipation is important. So if you see the outcomes in Kerala, at least the number of nurses and doctors who died, even though each death is tragic, compared to the national average, our deaths is minuscule. It's like absolutely small in terms of direct deaths as a result of COVID-19. So we believe that that is because of good data, good networking, good training, and good anticipation. That's why I gave you the World Trade Center example. There were many doctors all around the world who felt that this was nothing but a new viral illness, and so they all perished. People in their 20s perished. People in their 30s also perished as early as April, May, June of 2020. Sometimes we forget this history. Now, we are now in April 2022, and reinfections are trending. We used to believe, at least many people were made to believe, that this was a one-off infection, and once everybody or most people are infected, we will get herd immunity. Herd immunity is the biggest lie, one of the biggest lies that came in the pandemic. Many lies came through the pandemic. Some of them are still trending. So reinfections are the rule now. In England, where the UK Health Security Agency, they put out substantial amounts of data. Even they are cutting back on the data production. They are one of the guiding lights of the world for data on the pandemic. So even they have said that reinfections are trending. So in the forward timeline, if you see this picture, this is from the beginning till now of the pandemic. This is the pandemic curve so far. It has not gone away. It is not like a curve that's gone down. It's actually going up, and we don't know what the future will be at this point. But we know that this blue, what is seen here, are in fact reinfections, which means that this virus will continuously infect man unless and until it vanishes on its own. So we are literally at the mercy of this virus, and make no mistake, man is not in the driving seat, regardless of what Western scientists will make us think. The virus is in the driving seat. I think that's a fundamental fact that man has to realize, because we still seem to believe that man is in the driving seat and the virus is following a human narrative. That is wrong. Humans are following the narrative produced by the virus. So one of the things that is concerning me at this point is what will be the outcome of repeated infections. So the other narrative that occurred in the second year, the 2021, was that if you ever get reinfected, it will be mild because you already have immunity. Now that hypothesis is being questioned. In fact, when you were introducing me, I was listening to a talk by an immunologist saying that why that could be a wrong strategy. Okay, so I'll focus, because this is an intellectual talk and because the audience is an elite group of people who understand science very well, I'm going to focus on just one aspect, because if I speak on too many different aspects of the pandemic, I think it'll be a waste of time for everybody. So I'm going to focus on just this contentious topic: what is happening with vaccines and what is happening with our immunity. This is the question that's on everybody's minds. We've been hearing people all around the world scream headlines saying that vaccine immunity is waning. Yes, vaccines are not very good at stopping infections. We know that. So if you look at infections as an outcome, vaccines are not very good at it. We know that if you take 3 doses of a Pfizer vaccine and you go to a party after that, a social gathering after that, 64% of people will get symptomatic viral infection. This is a published series from Faroe Islands in Denmark. For those of you who are seeing my work on Twitter, I have 13,000 tweets on pure science on the pandemic. One of them is this. Yes, these are episodes which actually define history. The Faroe Island episodes is something that is a landmark, which tells us exactly what will happen if you drop your guard even after taking a booster. So there's a hard fact here that vaccines are not good at stopping infections. There will be some relatively lower infection risk for about 10 weeks. After that, it rapidly fizzles out. So from this aspect, yes, vaccine immunity wanes. But what we are more concerned about is this one. None of us want to die, at least not through COVID-19. So are vaccines good at stopping us from dying? Yes, they are. And is that part of the immunity waning? The answer is a big no. Now, that is where these claims are misleading. When people scream that immunity is waning, the public tends to believe that their protection against death is waning, and which is why they're being prompted to take more and more and more and more booster doses. That is a theme that started in Israel and then is being copied in the United States. And from the United States, that trend comes across to Europe and then to Australia. So that is the path of this information. So how well have vaccines done? Let's just look at some data. If you log on to the CDC's website, and if you do, you have to toggle through some buttons to reach the screen. It is not easy to reach the screen. It's well hidden. The screen is well hidden. If you're really interested, can you see this over here? You have to click on this death button twice to be able to access it. Otherwise, this graph remains hidden. It is only available to those who actually spend the time on the site. So this is from CDC's government, America's CDC site. There's CDC everywhere. Like India has CDC, and then South Africa has CDC and all that. So this is the US CDC's website. I'll explain this graph for you. This is basically vaccination and death. So on the x-axis, we have time. So as we go forward, this is time. On the y-axis is the number of deaths per 100,000 population. Now, this graph is divided by age group. So we got the 18 to 49 age group. we got the 50 to 64 age group, and we got the older people here, 65 plus. Now let's look at the older people here. The black line over here, are you able to see my pointer? Can I ask you?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, good. Okay. Just concentrate on this black line over here. Can you see that? Now, that is the unvaccinated population. And over time, you can see the death rates. This is the death rate per 100,000. That is 57 per 100,000. That's the number here. And obviously, somewhere here, it'll be around 48, and this will be around, say, 20. All right. So I hope you get the picture. So this is the unvaccinated death rate over the age of 65. Now, the bottom line, this is 0. Can you see the 0 mark here? That is 0. So if you see the 0 line here, I'll just draw it out here. See, the 0 line runs like this. The 0 line. You can see that the dotted line is the 2-dose group, and the hard or the solid blue line is the 3-dose group, this one. So this is a booster group, and this is the 2-dose group. You can see that they're both extremely close to 0 here. You can see that. You see the 0? Both these lines are extremely close to 0. The difference between these two, if you calculate the difference, is just 7 per 100,000. You know how much that is in percentages? The percentage risk reduction is 0.0007. Something like that. Yeah. Okay. It's multiple decimal 0, which is practically the difference between the size of your right index finger and your left index finger. If you look at your right hand and your left hand, you look at the index fingers, they look pretty much the same. To me, they look the same. But if you take a calipers and you measure it, yes, there will be like a 0.1 millimeter difference between the two. But when you exaggerate it on a graph, it looks very impressive. So that is what is concerning me from when I look at literature across the world. There are exaggerated graphs which are misleading people. And these graphs are exaggerating tiny differences, make it look like a monster. So now let me come back to this age group here, 50 to 64 age group here. Now, the black line, as I mentioned, is unvaccinated. And here's the 0 line. See, the 0 line has 3 lines on it. The original line of the graph, and then the 2-dose line and the 3-dose line, they're all on 0 line. So in 50 to 64, it makes no difference at all. Taking any extra dose makes no difference. Now, when it comes to younger people, people under the age of 50, I know this sounds very provocative. Vaccines made no difference. I know I may sound like an anti-vaxxer when I say that. I'm just reading out a graph from the CDC's website for you. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not here to say that vaccines don't work. Look at this data. Below the age of 50, there is no difference between unvaccinated, vaccinated, boosted people. They're all at 0. See the death rates. You know why this is important? I'll explain this with the graph here, which is why it's important to look at numbers very, very impartially. All right. So I hope you get the picture here. If a 3rd dose is believed to make any difference, it makes a minuscule difference in the overall death rate in 65 plus. That's it. When you look at very large numbers, the advantage is small differences like minor variations will get ironed out. So in the 50 to 64 group, you're better off being vaccinated. In the under 50 group, I'm very sorry to say there is no difference in the death rate between any of these groups, unvaccinated, vaccinated, or double vaccinated. All right. So I hope this graph is clear. This is a graph which was made by Dr. Duncan Robertson, who we network on Twitter. Now, I'll explain this graph for you. This is January of 2021, and these are deaths. These are COVID deaths. And each color on this bar represents a different age group. So you see the blue represents 90 plus. The yellow represents 75 to 79. The blue represents 60 to 64. See how low I've come here? Over here. And if I were to look at this age group, 45 to 49, I have to look very, very, very closely to the bottom here. Can you see that? At the very bottom, there's a tiny line. And if you take all these age groups combined, below the age of 50, I've drawn out a tiny red bar here. Those are the deaths under 50. for the pandemic. This means that about 98 to 99% of deaths occur over the age of, say, let's say 45 or so. And that's the same in Kerala as well. 97% of Kerala deaths occurred above the age of 40. So that is why, if I go back to your previous graph, this group is very low risk of dying. In terms of absolute numbers, the absolute risk of death is very, very, very small, which is why even if you give them 15 doses of vaccine, it's not going to make any difference to the outcome. So I hope that message is clear, which is why in some of the messaging, you might have seen some of my works as well. We say if a third dose is believed to be helpful, as per evidence, it only works in this group. We want to see a difference, right? Okay, we want to see a difference, and that difference very clearly occurs only in this age group. All right. So this is again one of my tweets, which basically from data from US. See, 99% of their deaths are over the age of 40, and only 0.3% of deaths are occurring below the age of 30. And then we have boosters now being given out to children under the age of 10 nowadays. So I don't know where the world is going now. Okay, this is a cartoon that I made. I draw a little bit. So here's an easy immunology cartoon here for you. So this is time. These are 3 scenarios, 1, 2, and 3. So if you take somebody who's been recently vaccinated, fully vaccinated, they get 2 walls. This is called the 2 walls of immunity. The first is called the neutralizing antibody, and the second is called the T cells. Now, if you have a tall wall of neutralizing antibody, the virus can't get past the neutralizing antibody. They neutralize the virus. That's why the virus gets zapped here. You can see that. Now, even so, the virus is not able to penetrate this wall, so the infection stops there, which is why immediately after your vaccination, you're extremely unlikely to pick up an infection, unless you really go and hang out in a closed room, in a bar, start shouting and yelling, and spend hours together without masks. Okay, that's a high viral load environment. For regular people like ourselves, if you're in healthcare, you wear a mask, it's very unlikely you'll get infected in the first 10 weeks of vaccination. This is the reason. You got high levels of neutralizing antibodies in the blood, some of which will also guard your mucous membranes. And that is why you don't get infected. But as time goes by, as time passes, the same situation after 6 months, you see this wall has come down now. It's shorter. It is there. So it's easier for the virus to leap past this. So the virus can infect us. But the big wall is still standing. The T cell wall is still standing here. So the virus will get killed by these guys. But this is called an infection. So the person will get a fever, some body aches, some headaches, and so on. But the person will not die. So this is why if you take a full course of vaccination, that is 2 doses of any regular vaccine used around the world, regardless of what name you call it or what technology is being made or what company makes it, and whatever their claims are, all vaccines available in the world, they are excellent at building the second wall. So whether it is inactivated vaccine, adenovirus vector vaccine, mRNA vaccine, whether it is subunit vaccine, whatever it is, they're all excellent at generating this wall of T cells, and it does not disintegrate. Now let's look at unvaccinated. This is the unvaccinated group. In the unvaccinated, there's no neutralizing antibody. So let's assuming that this is unvaccinated and uninfected, okay, like in 2020. There is no neutralizing antibody, so virus gets a free ride, infects easily. And if they're young enough, they can build this T cell wall fairly quickly before the virus goes and kills or damages the internal organs. But the older we are, the less efficient this construction is. So which is why I've drawn here that the second wall is under construction. So this is what happens in unvaccinated people, which is why in 2020, there was carnage, especially among doctors. Doctors in large cities, they sit in cubicles that are barely larger than the size of a toilet. And they see about 100 and 150 patients a day without a mask. You can imagine the amount of viral load that went in. And that is why they died. Okay, so now this is from today. I'll just take you through today's tweet. There's a little bit of math that I've shown here. I'll expand it for you. This is again from today. Vaccine effectiveness. vaccine effectiveness calculation for severe disease is often wrong because of widespread incidental infection. I'll explain how this works. You will frequently hear that vaccine efficacy has dropped from 90 to 30% and so on. I'll explain why that's a wrong statement. Okay. Now I'm going to expand this for you. So this requires a little bit of concentration, so bear with me. I'll use a green here. Right, now I'll walk you through this. Now this is the 18 to 64 age group who've received 2 doses of vaccine. So this is, let me expand this even further. I think you can see now. Okay, so the 2-dose vaccine, this particular one is mRNA. They have found that the vaccine effectiveness is only about 30. They're calling it's about 30. I'm sorry about the size. It's too large here. Okay. So this is time. This is time. And then they say that if you give a booster, it suddenly goes up. The vaccine efficacy goes up, and this is time. This is 25 weeks. Okay. This is 25 weeks after a booster here, over here. I hope you can see that. Okay. Now, how did they arrive at this 30%? I told you it's about 30%. How did they arrive at that? How they arrived at it as follows. They looked at people who went to the emergency room and then were hospitalized for at least a day with Omicron. And they found that the 2-dose vaccine effectiveness was only 30. For people who don't have the time to analyze it, they'll think, oh my God, it's terrible. But you know what? Everybody in the hospital is positive. Half the world was positive at that time. Even in Kerala, we had people walking into the hospital for whatever reason. If we tested them, they were positive. So, which means that all of these individuals that they tested were not necessarily COVID patients. So now they used another criterion for the same subgroup, 18 to 64, the same group, those 2. What they did was they looked for oxygen. How many people actually went on oxygen or on a ventilator as a result of COVID-19? Now see the same vaccine. They find that the vaccine is about 82% effective at 25 weeks here. Okay, now let me take you through the other one. This is 30. And here we have a vaccine effectiveness of 82. Now, how could that be? That's because in the second instance, they've shown the true criterion. They've actually looked at the oxygen and ventilated ICU. So if you look carefully, you will find evidence that vaccine immunity does not wane. See, this is the true vaccine effectiveness at 25 weeks. 2 doses. They're all the same. These numbers are all the same. They're all above 80 or close to 80. So that's why I said many of the studies will give exaggerated findings, which may suit certain decisions. So I don't want to get into that, but be very careful when anyone tells you vaccine is not working anymore, you need to take more doses. Look carefully at the data before you make your decision. So again, this is, which again, I've repeated the graph here just to show you. This is the importance of looking at the right subset of patients while calculating vaccine effectiveness. So if you want to compare 2 students in a school, you have to compare them based on the right parameter. If you compare, say say the height of 2 individuals, you can't tell them, you can't compare their performances. So you have to be very, very specific as to what parameter you're looking at. So the parameter that's used is COVID plus oxygen. When they used that, they found that there's actually almost no waning at 25 weeks. So that is again a little bit of a statistics lesson here. Again, to show that it's very important to make your own conclusions. So this brings us to the question, how many vaccine doses can we possibly take? There's something called the principle of diminishing returns. 1 and 2 doses work very well because with the first dose, you create what is called a reactive memory. With the second dose, you create what's called long-lived plasma cells, which means that these plasma cells will go and live in your bone marrow forever. Yes, they go and find lodging in the bone marrow. They attach themselves to a single stromal cell inside the bone marrow and live there forever. Some of them live in the tissues, such as lungs, skin, and other mucous membranes, and others live in lymph nodes. They go into the spleen, and they are also seen circulating in the blood looking for trouble. So if they ever sense trouble, within hours, these memory cells go into action, and they go into a machine gun-like action. And so so if you've received 2 doses, you're well protected. Now, there are some individuals who fail to mount an immune response. So that is beyond the discussion. That's a minority of individuals. So again, if you give a 3rd dose, a 4th dose, and a 5th dose, then the amount of response you get will be lower than with each successive dose, even though there are claims to the contrary. So here is Dr. Phil Cross, who was the Deputy Director of FDA's Office of Vaccines Research during the pandemic. I believe he quit the FDA based on some differences of opinion. I don't know the background as to why he quit, but he was not happy with the way science was being handled. So now here is Dr. Phil Cross on record that says, unless you are at high risk, the initial 2 vaccine doses are enough. He wrote in the Wall Street Journal. And here is Professor Dr. Andreas Radbruch. Let me show you his background. Now, Dr. or Professor Radbruch from Germany, he is the head of immunology. He works at one of the world's largest immunology centers. He has 47,000 immunology citations. He has done pioneering work on memory cells. He knows, he has seen, and he has talked with memory cells while we are imagining them. Okay, now, this is someone I would very carefully listen to. Now, listen to what he has said in a statement to the German government about a month ago. He said, vaccinating twice or recovering once is better than vaccinating 3 times to maintain the adaptability of immunological memory. He said that because variants will prevail in the future that circumvent the rudimentary protection of mucous membranes by mucosal antibodies. If you want to read more about that, you can just Google Andreas Radberg's statement. This statement was written to the government of Germany while they were trying to make a decision on vaccination. Okay, so a short version of this is just like antibiotics. Okay, for a urinary tract infection, uncomplicated, healthy young woman, just 3 days is fine. You don't need to give 14 days of meropenem to get rid of it. Similar logic. Sometimes too much might not be what we need. Unless there is compelling data, I think we should be very cautious about overdosing on any medical product. Now, I'm going to take you through the current situation in Europe. I've shown you 2 graphs.
Doctor, you are muted.
Unmute. Okay. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Here we go. Where was that graph? Okay. So here is Western Europe, and the more red you are, the worse the situation is of the pandemic, or the more the disease spread. And here is the vaccination status. The more green you are, the more highly vaccinated you are, and light green is lower vaccinated. This is the vaccination status of several European nations. Now, I can take you through Finland. 100% vaccinated, 99% boosted. Here, there is Denmark, that's 100% vaccinated, about 98% boosted. This is the elderly segment, okay? Now, younger age groups, they tend not to be fully vaccinated. Though, as I showed you in the graphs earlier on, we are more concerned about the older age groups vaccination in terms of, because they are at much greater risk for dying. And that's why I've chosen a graph that represents the vaccination status of older people. Now, look at Finland here. This is 2022. Finland had more deaths in the past 3 months than during the entire pandemic. So what are we looking at here? Things are not looking rosy. There are things that are not fitting into what is called the popular narrative. If you ask me, my explanation is as follows. Somewhere around here, the government decided, let's stop all the restrictions. Everybody's vaccinated now. Everybody in the older age group is protected by boosters. Let's remove all the restrictions. So then a slow burn of infections occurred in the community. And when many people are infected in the older age group, then some deaths do happen. And these deaths almost exclusively occurred in the older age group. This situation can happen in any country, especially if people believe that the pandemic is over. It may be a trickle in your own neighborhood, but many trickles will make a large river. That is what is happening in Finland. This is my explanation for this. This is not to say that vaccines don't work. This is in spite of vaccination, when we had a fast spreading variant, which is able to escape immunity and infect enormous numbers of people and reinfect people. This is the result we are looking at in Finland. And again, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are on a forward timeline. There's no way we can go backward. We can't go backward in time. We can only look forward. Now, here is again, a Finland death pattern. This is time. And here are the deaths that are separated out using colors. So the pink represents 80 plus, the red is 70 plus, and the orange is 60 to 70. So if you take out people who are less than 60, here is where it stands. So this is an area that requires a lot of attention. And I don't see that happening in any public messaging, including in our country. Closing towards the end of my talk, when will the next wave come is a question that everybody is asking. The next wave, we don't know when it will come. We know it will come because after all, this is a cyclical disease. It goes like this. In different nations, it works differently. Now, this graph shows us Delta. We've got Omicron here. We've got Gamma. We've got Alpha. We've got Lambda and Delta. See how far away genomically all of these variants are located. So we have no idea where the next variant might come out of. It may spring out from here. It may come out there. It may come out here, etc. So it is not like Delta led to Omicron. Delta is nowhere near Omicron. And Gamma is far away from Omicron, and the same way that Alpha is not near Delta. So we are not at a point where we can say, now the next variant is going to look like this. It's like an iPhone upgrade. Okay, the next iPhone is going to look like that. It's not going to work like this. So we have no idea what the biological properties of the next variant is. This is, if there's one thing that's worrying me in the world, this is what it is. When the next variant comes, we do not know what else it brings with it. We simply do not know. This is some data from Shanghai. Remember, I said in the beginning, we must look at data only, and if you look at data with a close, with a microscope, can you tell the trends? Now, this is in Shanghai as I speak. Situation there. So a lot of people are being tested. See, these are all the asymptomatic cases from March 13th onwards. Huge numbers of asymptomatic cases, and these are the real clinically symptomatic patients. So in any country, this is the denominator of COVID-19 in the population, which is virus, which is not causing disease. So without knowing the true extent, in the case of a less than 40, it perhaps makes no difference, but in a 75-year-old, this might make a difference. That's my point here. So I'll remind you that the COVID-19 is not the only cyclical virus. There are many cyclical viruses. The 1989 article looks at so many cyclical viruses. So this is just one more of those. And this is a question that all of us are perhaps asking ourselves, where are we? Where are we? Where are we now in the pandemic? I get this a lot when I go to see my family members, my friends. The first thing they ask is, where are we? So many people like to think that we are here. The worst is over. This perhaps the Omicron wave. We are somewhere here. But I'll say, really, if we want to look at where we are, what I think is we are somewhere there. So a few challenges ahead. I'll stop with this. Things that we need to focus on are the things that are least heard. How to improve our room ventilation. What is the ideal PPE to use? Do we really need the coveralls? My opinion is no, unless this situation specifically demands it in very, very select settings. How to juggle the fluctuating staff requirement and caseload, because this thing is going to fluctuate. What is going to happen with cancer screening? Because we were getting ahead with cancer screening in the last, I think, 15 years or so, or maybe 10 years, with a lot of effort from a lot of ourselves, a lot of people in this group, including myself. All that has stopped. Cancer screening has literally ground to a standstill. So what will happen to that backlog? What will happen to all the elective procedures that people chose not to do? What will happen to all this staff sickness? And what will happen with all these recurrent infections? Are they going to get long COVIDs? Are they going to lose their productivity? So these are questions. So this is one of my favorite quotes, that when you deal with uncertainty or deal with difficult times, none of us is as smart as all of us, which means that, like the Tuesday code meetings that I run in Cochin, unless we stick together, we share data, we share our observations, no matter how small they are, we will never get anywhere. So I'll stop here and I'll thank you for listening. If there are any questions, I can take them.
Having some small technical issues. Sorry for the inconveniences. One question I would like to ask you. The Covaxin is being classified as an immune potentiator.
Can you speak up?
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. One question I wanted to ask you. Covaxin is being classified as an immune potentiator or a vaccine adjuvant.
I'm so sorry. Your audio, I can't hear it. Covaxin?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Covaxin has been classified as an immune potentiator or a vaccine
adjuvant. Sorry, classified as a?
Immune potentiator or a vaccine adjuvant.
What's the question?
One second, sir. 1 second.
Okay, any other questions meanwhile? Because we got people waiting.
Sir, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Yes, so I wanted to ask you one question. This Covaxin is being classified as an immune potentiator or a vaccine adjuvant. Right. So
I don't understand that statement at all. Who made that statement? Covaxin is not a vaccine adjuvant, it's a vaccine.
It's a vaccine, okay.
Yes.
So there
it's
are
not an adjuvant.
People, most of the doctors, they are taking combinations now. Covishield along with Covaxin.
Yes.
What is your insight on that? Is it advisable or?
Okay, I think your question is, I'll rephrase your question. Is it okay to mix vaccines? Is that your question?
Sorry, sir?
Is it okay to mix and match vaccines? Is that your question? That is, if you take one series of Covishield, is it okay to take Covaxin as a booster? Is that the question?
Yes, that is
okay.
right.
Okay. So the answer to that is, I don't know. There's no data. There's no data available in India that's published yet, that's available to people like me, that tells us the outcome of such an experiment. There are a few case reports that apparently occurred inadvertently in some parts of northern India, where the second dose was given inadvertently as vaccine A versus vaccine B. So based on these isolated case reports, it's very difficult to generalize. I will not do that. Personally, I would not stray past general recommendations from the government. The government has said that if you wish to take a third dose, take a third dose from the same series of vaccine. Personally, if you ask my personal opinion, this is purely opinion, I don't think you gain anything by mixing another vaccine. Personally, I've gone through the immunology of it. You're not going to gain anything. The only vaccine that has a clear advantage over the others as a booster, I repeat, as a booster, not for the primary series. As a third dose, if somebody wishes to take a vaccine as a third dose, for many reasons, an mRNA vaccine is superior. The predominant reason is that the number of fold where neutralizing antibodies are increased after an mRNA vaccine is about 30-fold compared to inactivated or other vaccine about 2-fold. So, and for subunit about 8-fold. Again, I'll caution you here, measuring immunity is not like comparing two apples. See, if I have two apples in my hand, one is 150 grams and the other is 250 grams. I can tell you with certainty that the 250-gram apple is larger and heavier than the other. There's nothing in immunology that helps you compare for COVID immunity. So with that caveat, I'll say this, that if somebody wants to take a third dose, which is better than what's available, it's an mRNA vaccine. But unfortunately, it's not available here in this country.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, please?
Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Sir, I have a question. When this COVID era is going to an end?
I simply do not know. I wish I knew the answer. I simply don't have the answer to that. I'll consider it like this. It is a new disease that has come here and it's here to stay. And I think we need to accept that. Sometimes in life, as doctors, I think many of the audience are actually doctors. We've all faced a situation where you give a difficult diagnosis to a patient and the patient says, no, it's impossible I have the diagnosis. I think much of the world is in that situation now. They're saying, no, it is just something mild. It's just a common cold virus. All you guys are imagining it. No, this is a problem that's happened to the world. We just have to deal with it. We have to deal with it. There's no need to look at it emotionally. We're going to deal with it. It's not going away. It is likely going to be, quoting all the experts that I network with around the world, it is going to be a permanent problem. It is. And we don't know the future. We simply do not know what 2024 is going to look like. We simply have no idea. We simply don't know. Anyone who makes predictions, I would vehemently disagree, because every prediction that's been made has been proven wrong by this virus. So with that humility, I think if we approach the basic features, like, it's like a new cholera. Cholera has come to the water. You boil your water, you drink the water, you'll be safe. There are people who used standard precautions, nothing magical. They've stayed safe from it. Likewise, I think we can go a long way in keeping ourselves safe. I frequently say a story about this. See, my subspecialty is gastroenterology. When I started training in gastroenterology, one of my biggest fears was causing a perforation, because perforation is an injury that I am causing to the patient. So I was terrified of it. So when I started my career, I was very wary about this, because when I entered practice abroad, I didn't want to be the first one to cause a perforation. So I was very, very, very careful. I went through every seminar possible, honed my skill properly, made every effort possibly to make my technique the best possible that I could do. So the first 100 cases, I went without a perforation. A 500 case I passed without a perforation. I was like, okay, I'm closing to the average. Perforation happens once in 400 to 700 cases. 1,000 passed. I said, okay, I'm better than average now. 2,000 passed. 5,000 passed. 15,000 passed. 25,000 passed. Still no perforation. So the answer to the story is, if you're careful every day, if you stick with the basics, you don't need to be the world's greatest expert to do this thing safely. So that's the message. There's no magic here. I'm no better a gastroenterologist than any of my friends in Kerala. It's just I'm careful. I'm just very, very careful with what I do. So likewise, in COVID-19, even though it's an unpleasant situation, that's why I said, tearing somebody's colon is an unpleasant situation. It's a horror show for a gastroenterologist. So COVID-19 is an unpleasant situation. I think if we stick to, and we are respectful about the basics, when you become disrespectful, when you start taking the law into your own hands, you do the colonoscopy in the wrong patient, you're in a hurry, you want to catch a flight, you do it fast, that's when you tear people's colons. So likewise, in COVID-19, when we become cavalier, when we think we know everything, when we think that we are in the driving seat, that's when mistakes happen. So I think that's a long answer to your question. There's nothing to be desperate about, nothing to be disheartened about. It's reality. Okay. I'll take one more question.
Thank you.
Just to clarify on that question which was asked last, suppose if 70% of the global population are fully vaccinated, will the current break? Can we put can we say we have put an end to the pandemic?
No. We would have achieved that. You can do this 200% 3 times over. It's not going to end because this is a respiratory virus, and respiratory viruses have one thing in common: they have the ability to infect the same person over and over again. So your vaccination is not going to make a difference to the infection rate. It will keep coming at you, which is why I said herd immunity was the biggest lie that was perpetuated in the pandemic. People still believe it, which is why I said belief is different and science is different. We can believe whatever we want to believe in. I may believe in Santa Claus. That's fine. That's my personal choice. But as far as the pandemic goes, the data says you will get reinfected. That's why I gave you the Faroe Island episode. I think that person might have missed the beginning. I'll repeat the Faroe Island episode. Faroe Island is an island, very beautiful island close to Denmark. It's part of Europe. So a group of healthcare workers, after getting boosted by Pfizer vaccine, that's 3-dose Pfizer vaccine, they went for a social gathering, and 2/3 of them came down with symptomatic Omicron with fever, myalgia, and pain. This shows that no matter how many doses of vaccine you take, you will get infected if you get exposed to the virus. So, which is why vaccines they're just one layer to the protection. Now, this is not to be interpreted by saying, Dr. Rajiv said vaccines don't work. No, it's not like that. Vaccines have certain limitations. You're much better off vaccinated than you're unvaccinated. You saw the graph. If you do not want to die from an infection, the best thing you can do is to get at least 2 doses of vaccine. You can argue that natural immunity works, but if you go to my Twitter today, I've explained why natural immunity might not be enough. That's the latest information. That's one paper from Brazil that I've actually outlined yesterday in plain English. All of my tweets are in plain language, and a lot of people follow these tweets from other countries as well. My Twitter is Rajiv Jaydevan. You can just look at my Twitter, and it is mainly for the science. The time and effort I spend analyzing these papers from a neutral standpoint it's put out there for anybody who wants to give a talk, who wants to understand more. So it's a service to science and policymakers as well. Thanks for your comments.
We also have Dr. Anil Purthy, chairman of the National.
He's my dear senior. Yeah.
Oh, right. And also Dr. Venkadachalam from Jibmar. Any comments, sir, from any of you?
I can't see Dr. Anil Purthy. Anil Purthy was my senior from CMC Vellore. Anil, how are you?
Fine, thank you, Rajiv. So nice to see and hear of the commendable work that you continue to do. You have been a beacon of light for many others who sometimes look for light in the darkness. Thank you very much for your very, very clear communication and for sparing your time in looking at this data so carefully and treading it out for us. Thank you very much. Appreciate the efforts.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. We should catch up. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Dr. Venkadachalam from Jibmar. Any comments, sir?
Sir, may I ask a question? Hello.
Dr. Abraham,
Yes.
please.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the presentation. I would
I
like
can't
to
see you.
ask, sir, is it?
I'm sorry, I can't see you. Who's speaking?
Hello, sir.
Dr. Abraham Matthew?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So thank you for the lucid presentation. I would like to ask, sir, is it okay to say that Omicron is a natural vaccine that is given by God to man at this point?
It depends how the infection affected the person. This Omicron or the SARS-CoV-2 virus has the ability. If you have Twitter, just look at Rajiv Jaydevan and monkeys. Okay, so there's a nice paper which is done on actually monkeys. They're called non-human primates. The others might not be interested to hear the details, so I'll just skip to the main answer to you. This virus has the ability to infect us in grades. Sometimes it might just tick in the nose. It might not even tickle an immune response. Sometimes it may just produce a local immune response, just a mucosal immune response. The adaptive system might not respond. It may be bumped off by our innate cells. So what I'm trying to say is not every Omicron infection is the same. So if you have typical, say, mild to moderate Omicron infection, I think I agree with you that it does provoke an immune response. And if you've been vaccinated before, it will generate stimulate your memory cells. And that will give you a protective window that will last about 10 weeks, maybe a little longer. But whether it will make you any less likely to die from a future event, I do not know. I simply do not know the answer. And I'll add a caveat that there was a narrative that if you get enough number of infections, every infection will be smaller than the next or milder than the next. And that's also wrong. And that is my concern, as I mentioned. That's one of my biggest concerns. The world needs to study reinfections because this virus affects our immune system. It affects our endothelial system. We know that it causes more deaths, vascular events, and so on. So we can't take reinfections lightly. So more work needs to be done on reinfections. It's no longer a case of which vaccine works or how many doses. It's a case of what are the outcomes of these reinfections. So your answer to your question is, I don't think Omicron is a natural vaccine because the vast majority of people that it infected, it might not have provoked a sufficient immune response to act like a booster. The advantage of a vaccine is that it is given systemically and there's a standardized dose. It's like taking 500 milligrams of paracetamol. So everybody gets the same dose. So everybody's immune system gets the same sort of response. And if you throw in the variation in immune response between people, 2 doses of vaccine is the best bet one can get rather than natural infection. So 2 doses of vaccine on top of natural infection, that's the best protection you can get as of today. Now that narrative may change next year, I don't know. But the finest protection any person can hope to have got in 2021 was if you were infected in 2020 by natural infection and you got vaccinated in 2021. And that will give you the finest protection, in my humble opinion. Not the other way around. So I don't want people to walk around getting Omicron infections, hey, I want a booster. No, that's not a natural booster. Unfortunately, these narratives get diluted in the community. They'll say, doctor, the booster, people have tried that experiment.
When can we start giving handshakes?
I would give it. I'll tell you something. There's so much misinformation about the pandemic and this overemphasis about cleaning of tables and fumigating the air and things. So many gimmicks have happened. This virus spreads from person to person through air. It's like cigarette smoke. See, I don't smoke, but if somebody walks into my room and he or she had smoke, I can smell it from a distance. That is how the virus spreads. It's not through a handshake. No, I'm not asking everyone to, go and indiscriminately handshake with people. As a doctor, even before the pandemic, I never handshook at work. As a policy, I never did that because I knew that it's bad infection control policy. We know that. But in social settings, I have no problem with giving a handshake as long as I know that I'm not going to, wipe my face with that hand and that person's hand is not wet. Now, I'll take you through one very interesting study. Again, it's on my Twitter. Everything is on my Twitter. Everything I read, I put on Twitter with an explanation on it. You're welcome to read it. there was a paper that this is a very, very, very fine study. They looked at how long, what kind of risk does a takeout food provide? Let's say we live in the era of Swiggy and what's the other one? There's some other delivery service, right? Zomato, yeah. So they give you packed food. Is it safe? Is a question. Does it have virus? Suppose that person who's handling the food had virus. Will that virus come to me? Is a question that we all had in the first part of the year. It's a beautiful paper that answers that question unambiguously. Without going through the full details of the paper, I'll tell you this. If this is a milk packet, and I'm touching the milk packet handled by a COVID patient, the milk packet is wet. And that wetness gets transferred onto my hand and the virus will infect me. Infect me in the sense virus can transfer to my hand. Suppose that person gave you an apple. Apple is dry. It's a waxy substance. It's dry. If I touch the apple, the virus will not transfer onto my hand. I hope the message is clear.
Sir,
so shake hands. The hands are wet. Don't shake hands. And if the other person's hands you perceive are like a little, wet, I would go and wash. This is just my personal opinion. Knowing that if it's dry, it's okay. If it's wet, it is not okay. Shaking hands. If I meet my best friend, I have to shake hands. I can't just do this. I'm so sorry. That's just my view. Again, it depends on your comfort level. Okay. I know it's a gray area. It's a gray area, and it can be misunderstood. That message can be misunderstood. Be very careful how you communicate it. So it's not to indiscriminately go and hug people, but as a situation demands, there's nothing wrong in shaking hands as long as you wash afterwards. That's the correct answer.
Dr. Binoob is the Deputy Director of Kannur Medical College. Dr. Binoob,
Dr. Binoob, yes.
Sir, I have a question regarding to masks. What is your take on having mask, when to remove, regarding the usage of mask?
Okay, usage of mask. Remember, were you there in the beginning of the presentation, Dr. Binoob?
Yes, sir. I was there.
So I showed you the graph with 3 age groups, right?
Yeah.
We need to understand that as doctors, we need to clearly understand when a patient walks in, at least from my training, you are trained to that the moment the patient walks in the door, you have to start examining the patient. You're visualizing what's happening. Likewise, when we look at society, we have to classify society into 3. People who are over the age of 60 or 65, people who are between 40 and 65, and people who are below 40. People who are below 40 are literally at zero risk, okay? Especially in the post-infection, post-vaccination era. Now, everybody in the world has either been vaccinated or infected or both. When you add that to a below 40 age group, the chance of them dying is actually very, very small. I'm talking on relative terms. So if 3 people meet up without a mask, nothing's going to happen to them. At the worst, long COVID. Okay, long COVID is a terrible situation. That's a different situation. But again, the risk is not much more than 5%. Western statistics exaggerate long COVID. You know that. They don't do it on purpose, but it's because that's a different topic. I don't want to waste time discussing that. But if the same thing happens in a 65-year-old group, I'll want them masked. And in reality, 65-year-olds don't just mingle with 65-year-olds. There may be a 10-year-old, there may be a 40-year-old, there may be a 90-year-old in the same room. In that setting, if everybody masks, everybody is safe. So when, another way of putting it is, if you're hanging around with the older people inside a room, please wear a mask so that it protects them. It's courtesy. It's like washing your hands before you shake hands with someone. Like you are offering your clean hand, right? If your hand is dirty, you're not going to offer your hand to someone. Likewise. So I hope that vibe, get the vibe.
Yes.
Outdoors on a beach, I wouldn't wear a mask. I would not.
Okay, sir. One more question, sir. What about the post-COVID syndrome? Whether it will be like the sequel of TB, can we expect more complications regarding to lungs? Sir?
That's the area to watch out for. There's so much data out there. It's impossible to summarize into one sentence. It is a concern. you saw the UK Biobank study, right? The UK Biobank study shows that the brain actually shrinks after COVID-19. It's one of the finest most quoted papers in the world. As to what happens long term, I do not know. There are many people who are suffering immeasurably from long COVID, and they're also being rejected by their families. Their doctors don't listen to them. They tell them it's all imaginary. They're losing time. They are losing productivity. So it's a big problem. It is a problem. But we've looked at long COVID here. I'm sure you would have seen lots of patients, but our numbers are not as much as are reported in the West. It is there. It is there.
We don't have any more questions in the chat. So any last questions or clarifications or comments? Dr. Suma Devi.
Crackers are going off. I'm so sorry about the noise. Let me mute so that I don't disturb.
If there are no more questions, over to you, Dr. Abel.
Thank you, sir. Now as we are coming to the end of this session, we would like to thank Dr. Rajiv Jayaravan, sir, our chief guest, for the wonderful exposition of this very important topic. Sir, you made it very clear to us on the future of the pandemic. Also to Jomsi sir, who moderated this session. We have some very special guests among the audience. Dr. Anil Porti, who is also my professor and guide. Dr. Felix Jones, who is the HOD of Community Medicine from Pushpagiri Institute of Medical Sciences. Dr. Shivasudan, who is the HOD of Forensic Medicine from Toronto Medical College. Dr. Venkatachalam from JIPMER. And Dr. Binu, Dr. James from Government Medical College, Thrissur, and many others. Thanking everyone for making this program a big success. Again, thanking Dr. Rajiv Jayaravan for the wonderful session. As Sir has said, together we can make big changes, and being careful is the only way out to wade through this pandemic. Now, as we close this program, we have every Wednesday, we host an international webinar at 6 p.m. And for the next week, speaking on SARS-CoV-2 genomes, past, present, and future. He's the genomic scientist at IIT New Delhi. So see you all next week. Happy Easter and happy weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.